The why and the how the NCAA tournament format might stop UConn from cutting down the nets. Welcome into the Hoops Cap Pod, your only daily podcast powered by the Big East Energy Network. Yes, the Hoops Cap Pod. We're happy to have you with us, and thank you for being a part of our show and maybe making this a part of your daily routine. You're home for the UConn women's and men's basketball. We're available wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, part of the Big East Energy Podcast Network, where passion meets precision. Before we dive into today's show, right corner of the screen, like and subscribe to the 11-time national champion women and 6-time national champion men, the absolute hoops capital of the world. If you listen on audio, it's on Spotify, Apple, it's on Amazon, it's on Odyssey, all these different platforms. Go find it. Look it up under either Hoops Cap Pod or Big East Energy Network, and you shall find it. You'll also find some other Big East content. We're adding shows all the time. There's a Creighton podcast. It's pretty awesome. They had a Ryan Kalkbrenner interview, but we're also proud to say that this is only the beginning. We've only been in existence for less than a week, guys. Less than a week, and I want to thank you for almost 2,000 subscribers on YouTube and a bunch of people reaching out and making us feel like this is the right move. So thank you again. All right. Why and how the NCAA tournament format might stop UConn from cutting down the nets. I don't know if you know about what's going on, but let's set the scene. Confetti is barely settled in on Spokane, Washington. Obviously, this is a few days ago or yesterday. UConn women's basketball after 2 nights ago, after a dominant win over USC in the Elite Eight, is walking single file toward their team bus. It's late. Players are exhausted, smiling, celebrating, and ready for Tampa. KK Arnold is even playfully body checking athletic director David Benedict. In passing, spirits are high, vibes are at an all-time high. But David Benedict was not smiling. And got some of this info from Bella, who's on location, who's our intrepid reporter for Hoops Cap Pod. But why is this discomfort? Because while the Huskies are headed to their 24th Final Four, they're also staring down a logistical gauntlet the NCAA put in front of them, and one that threatens to undermine the competitive equity in the most important weekend of the season. Quote, "We're finishing at almost Tuesday Eastern time," Benedict said, checking his watch, doing one of these, "and it's Tuesday, and we have to play Friday. How is that equitable?" That's a great question, Dave. Love to have you on the show to talk about it after we win a title. UConn played its elite game in Spokane, Washington, tipping off at 6 p.m. Pacific time Monday. They wrapped up late, hit the hotel around 10. And by 10 a.m. Tuesday, they were already boarding a flight to Tampa, a cross-country trip with just 2 full days before a national semifinal. Meanwhile, UCLA, the tournament's #1 overall seed, played Sunday afternoon in Albany. They flew home that night, had the luxury of 2 full nights in their own beds. 2! Not 1, 2 nights before heading to Florida. That's a 36-hour recovery and preparation advantage. Does Vegas know this? Because I guarantee you they don't. Because UConn's like an 8.5-point favorite against UCLA, which is wild to me. We'll get to that later. Benedict continued. Our kids will get to sleep around 2 o'clock Eastern time. They have to get up, travel all day to Tampa, and right away, you're into all the different requirements they have for you at the Final Four. And we're the last team playing. It's a disadvantage. And it's not sour grapes. This is just a fact. I'm going to say something that I think most people need to hear. If you're a UConn fan, you're listening to this and going, I agree with you. If you're a UConn hater, you're listening to this and going, shut the fuck up. I mean, I get that. Like, you're literally saying that. And because I'm on my own, I can say those words now. But before you say I'm crazy or, this is insane, there's a difference between the athletic director of UConn, David Benedict, who's been a guest on my show before, saying to the press that this is a disadvantage. Not because all the teams are getting this done. He's saying we're the only team. We're playing last and we get in last. Think about that. Who we're playing, they had 2 full days. 2. This isn't just some bullshit trying to put in essentially, having a built-in excuse that if you do lose this game in the semifinal, I mean, how about if you win this game and you have an incredibly difficult game against UCLA, now you got to go play South Carolina or Texas, and don't you think the body doesn't recover the same way that if you were to have those 2 extra days? So it's not just about the sleep or the flights. It's about preparation, physical recovery. How about the coaches having extra time to scout UConn in the principle of competitive and equitable fairness? That's all we're talking about. All things being equal, I think UConn absolutely should be the favorite. But given the 2-day disadvantage of preparation, of recovery time, I think you might have to rethink that. It starts with the NCAA's new super regional format. Introduced in 2023, instead of 4 regional sites across the country, we now have 2. This year, Spokane and Birmingham. Each site hosts 8 teams. 8. Resulting in massive scheduling congestion, early wake-up calls, and narrow practice windows. Coaches, including Geno Auriemma, have sounded the alarm from day one. Let's play the clip of Geno when asked about the super region.
On top of the cross-country trip.
Well, first of all, there's always going to be somebody that has to travel, who's ever in the West region when the finals are on the East Coast, and vice versa. So somebody's always going to have to travel. But it would only be one team, correct? One team. Secondly, in a normal world run by normal people, there would only be 4 teams here, which means there would be no games today. The games would be tomorrow, which means we wouldn't have to get up at 6 a.m. to have a 8 o'clock practice here this morning for an hour, which means we wouldn't have to get up at 5 a.m. to have a 7:30 shoot around for half an hour, take us longer to get through security than to actually be on the court. Okay? God bless whoever wins Monday night, okay? And they've got to fly cross country, which is all day Tuesday. Then they have 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, to play the biggest game of their life. The guys who don't know about, according to a lot of women's basketball people, they finish Sunday. Then they have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and they play Saturday. But there's a lot of people in the women's basketball committee that think they're smarter than that. So whoever came up with this super regional stuff, and I know who they are, ruined the game. They did. They ruined the game. Half the country has no chance to get to a game in person. But you're making billions off of TV. Well, actually, you're not. That would be the men's tournament.
As the kids would say, let Geno cook. And what did he say that was wrong? In fact, he said, whoever did this, and he's talking about the NCAA tournament committee, and I'm sure there's others that are part of it, but these are the head ones. Dorita Radcliffe, the deputy director of athletics at Arkansas, also part of the selection committee. Janice Rosario, who's the athletics and women administrator at New Mexico, and Jill Shields, who's the deputy athletic director at Kansas State. Those are the head honchos that are responsible for this NCAA Super Regionals. Benedict questioned the logic too, and the priorities behind the setup. His quote was, "I'd love for the people making this decision to try to explain what the competition equity piece is in the decision-making process. These are the most important games in some of our students, like student athletes, will ever have an opportunity to compete in. And don't think the current setup allows for that." So what does it allow for? 4 sites, not 2, equal prep time, across teams and a schedule that doesn't force teams to cross 3 time zones in a 72-hour turnaround. Instead, UConn played a late game on Monday night, flies across the country while their opponent gets more sleep, more reps, and more preparation time for the coaches. Quote from Dave Benedict, "It's impossible to manage 8 teams in one building. It's just impossible." And we're rarely asked for our opinion at UConn. And before I even get to the last part of his quote, which I think is beautiful, do you think that maybe the women's game should come to folks at UConn who, I don't know a few things about navigating the NCAA tournament, considering they've won 11 national championships, been to 24 Final Fours, 32 straight Sweet 16s, and essentially are the flagship program of women's college basketball and have changed the culture around how we consume women's sports in general. But let's make it more difficult for them. That makes total sense. And honestly, it could have been anybody. If USC wins that game, they're screwed too, especially without Juju. But if they somehow, it's a 4-point lead going to halftime or fourth quarter, if they somehow eke that game out and it's a really tough, what if it goes into double overtime? What if that game had Juju Watkins and they played a triple overtime game and it's midnight on the West Coast? It's even less time. They're lucky that UConn was this damn good, where they were able to kick the shit out of USC in the fourth quarter to win by 14 points. I covered. Do you understand? It's so ridiculous. And then the last part David Benedict brings up is they come to us afterward, after all of this destruction, and ask what they can improve on. He didn't say destruction, by the way. Now it's back to his direct quote. And I'm not sure if that's a formality or if they actually utilize the information, because I can guarantee you Dave Benedict's not going to give the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee and the competition committee a good Yelp review. This is probably not a good place. And you know what? It's not the first time the NCAA and their decisions with travel, in other words, have dealt UConn a bad hand. If you're a fan of both teams, which a lot of you are, last year it was Dan Hurley's men's team forced to endure a travel fiasco en route to Phoenix for the Final Four. The charter that the NCAA tournament deals with, their landing gear was somehow botched. They didn't get to their hotel until 4 a.m. the next day. Absolutely brutal. But luckily for Hurley and company, he had the most talented team in the field, the most dominant tournament teams we've ever seen. UConn rolled through that Final Four anyway, after a pretty slow start against Alabama, to be honest with you, and cut down the nets despite the chaos. And now, Geno Auriemma's women are facing a worse, not similar, an absolute worse situation. Cross-country sprint from Spokane to Tampa. Less rest, less prep time. A glaring disadvantage compared to their opponents. But there's good news. This team, just like Hurley's squad, is peaking exactly at the right time. Paige Beckers is playing the best basketball of her career, as if her, career is coming to an end in college. Sarah Strong looks like the absolute truth and future of this team. Azzi Fudd is hitting fourth quarter daggers. And there's not a team in the country playing better. If it's only about slowing them down, this might be the only way to do it. So maybe this is just a disadvantage. Maybe it's fuel. Maybe it's both. Maybe the motivation will do exactly what Dan Hurley and his crew did last year. Overcome the schedule, ignore the imbalance, and wreck the bracket. Win anyway. This is still UConn. Still Geno Auriemma. Still that time of year. UConn's time of year. And if the NCAA won't level the playing field, then maybe the Huskies will take it upon themselves to do it the old-fashioned way on the court. And here's the kicker. This format is locked through 2028. Next year, Fort Worth and Sacramento. Final Four in Phoenix. More time zones, more imbalance, more ridiculousness. So it may not be UConn, but it's going to be another team's fan base, and they're going to be pissed off about it too. Why? I don't know. The NCAA tournament format might be the only thing that stops UConn from cutting down the nets. This has been another episode of the Hoops Cat Pod. We're out.